I'm an independent tourism consultant, been consulting to the industry across Africa for a hell of a long time, like 30 some years. And it's great to be here today. It's great to be meeting in person at WTM. And with Harold and many other people, I'm really passionate about proper, responsible, sustainable tourism, and particularly what we're going to talk about today. So Harold mentioned it at the end of the last session, if you were here. We're talking about creating shared value, which is for local economic development. And Harold often uses, or does use, Michael Porter's version of shared value concepts. Michael Porter, for those of you who might be in business, is a business guru from Harvard, created the Four Forces model and a few other things like that. So he said about shared value for a company is policies and operating practices that enhance the competitiveness of the company. I want us to remember that. We're talking about enhancing the competitiveness while simultaneously advancing the social and economic condition in the communities in which it operates. So we're concentrating on that community beneficial element of tourism, obviously on the African continent, and how do we make sure that it both makes you competitive as a company or as an NPO or whatever you might be, and benefit communities. What I thought I'd just give some context to this, because I think it's incredibly important, and it's not just Porter. So this is, who knows King 4? Anybody know King 4? Mervyn King. So King 4 was the fourth report on corporate governance that King brought out. Now, why is my slide doing something funny here? It's always what happens when you have a slide to work. It doesn't work. Sorry, guys. I will get there. I will. It was here earlier. Yeah, I'm sorry. Now my own little technology is not working. It's gone. I'll try and remember what he said. And this was in 2016. And this wasn't aimed at only the tourism industry. This isn't aimed at all corporate enterprises, small or big. And it was about how a corporate enterprise should govern itself. And what he basically said then as well is, you cannot have a shareholder precedence model. Shareholders are not the only people who matter in a company. And we've run companies too long where the shareholder is king, and their returns, what they need, comes above all other stakeholders. He said, now, in the world, you need a stakeholder company model where the shareholders are no more important than the other stakeholders. And who are those other stakeholders? For most businesses, it's customers, it's suppliers, it's employees, and it's the community in which they operate. Which is really interesting to me that the entire corporate world is supposed to already say that all of those stakeholders are equally important. And I think most corporates, most tourism industry players, and many people are only just getting to the community benefits element. But what I do think, and I'm not sure we'll see what the panelists' opinion is that COVID-19 has accelerated this. So if we look at the trends report that WTM put out yesterday, trend number 1 was proper sustainability and not greenwashing. And community benefits and community integration and community partnerships are a key component of proper tourism sustainability. And what other reports have said? Skift. Does anybody know Skift? They're a global tourism analytics communication company. Their third trend of 10 or 12, I can't remember, major trends they announced in January post-COVID was, well, let me read it. It was sustainability, it was the third trend, communities, and that communities will have to give every industry, but think about tourism, a social license to operate. You can't operate unless your community is already on board. That locals should be treated on an equal footing with tourists. And in Africa, and particularly South Africa, where the locals and the tourists can be entirely on other worlds in terms of equality. We have increased poverty because of COVID in Africa, and we have actually, if you look at trends in travel, we have increased premium travelers because of COVID as well. They've got more savings, they're looking for bucket list experiences, longer experiences. So this inequality, which is heightened in Africa, and the community social license to operate, which people are expecting, means that what now we are saying is your tourists and your investors are going to demand sustainability. And within that, they're going to demand community involvement. And I hope that's what comes through, because if your tourists and your investors are demanding it, actually, ultimately, it's not part of your competitive advantage. It's the underlying hygiene factors that every business should have. Just saying. But yeah, for now, I don't think we're anywhere near that. So having just given that as a little bit of an intro from my side, I've got 3 amazing people here. Evie, who is from Planetera, which I don't know, okay? So she's going to enlighten us about what Planetera does, but it's to do with community involvement in tourism. Glenn O'Leary, who's from African transfrontier destinations or Africa Ivory Route. Glenn's got amazing lodges and amazing work he's done with the community. And then Ruth is from Grootbos. If any of you here earlier, you heard Michael Lutzer, who's her boss or owner. I don't know. Probably doesn't boss anywhere around Michael, I would imagine. An amazing example, award-winning. In fact, both of these two businesses are award-winning sustainability, responsible tourism award winners at numerous WTM awards. So they're going to tell us a little bit about what they do and what they've achieved, and then I'll be asking them some questions and then some panel discussion or off the floor questions if we have time. We have started a bit late, but we'll try and find some time for questions from the floor. So I'm going to ask Ruth to take first, and everybody's got a presentation, so they'll take you through their presentation. And we'll take all the presentations first, and then we'll move on to panel debate and or floor questions. Thanks, Ruth.
Hi. Mike's working. Hello, everyone. And yes, I'm from Grootbos Private Nature Reserve, and yes, Michael is my boss and the founder and the visionary of Grootbos Private Nature Reserve. We are a small luxury eco-lodge on the other side of Hermanus on Walker Bay. And we have spectacular views. We have 2 lodges. We're small, we're boutique. We have Forest Lodge and our new Garden Lodge, spectacular views. All our units are set in the incredible Fynbos. And as everybody in the tourism industry and all the lodges will tell you, amazing beds, amazing food, amazing everything. Blows you away. But that's not why I'm passionate about Grootbos. Why I'm passionate about Grootbos is exactly what we're speaking about today, which is shared value. And yes, porter, we learned about porter at university, but actually the underlying principle is not one of academia, but actually quite an African principle, one of Ubuntu. I am because we are. And successful business and shared value, the best way to explain it is doing good business well, and that business doing good. That's the best way, well, that's the most simple way to understand it, or to further it. So, yeah, So our journey started over 19 years ago. So this isn't something new that Grootbos is doing. This comes from a different mindset. And shared value is also a different approach. It is a different mindset and approach to doing business. So Michael already formalized his work and shared value already 19 years ago, where he set up a vocational college, back then already with Kara Asmal. We already then, it was our vocational college, which was a very practical approach to, there wasn't a high school in the area. We're at the end of the bay, we're at the end of a tar road. Our geography underlined our socioeconomic issues. And this was a practical response to how do we pragmatically improve the lives in and around us. Another underlying way to understand shared value is to co-create the future for our communities and our environment. And that's exactly also in the earlier presentation too. There were 2 things. So it is co-creating with your community, but also working actively with your stakeholders. And with the industry, there does need to be greater industry collaboration. We're forever getting properties. We don't make it fancy. Our students are in very basic old desktop computers. It doesn't need to be a fancy endeavor to help and do community work. And in fact, you need willing and able, and you need the vision and the heart and the passion. What helps us in implementing our shared value is a model which is our 4C model, which is implemented through an organization called The Long Run. And that also helps. They're all tourism properties that are in it for the long run. And we implement this throughout our absolute DNA. We have line items for our commercial work, our cultural work, our conservation work, and our community work. But they also all intersect. You cannot have conservation without taking your community along. You cannot have conservation without celebrating a botanical culture and your heritage that is right there. So we use this very, very simple model. It it isn't anything difficult, but just employing that as a strategic guideline to everything that we do. In those 4 C's, our conservation work started 25 years with the work of Michael's father, Heine Lutzer. So we do have the advantage of building on a 25 years of legacy. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Where we are, the Cape Fynbos is one of the richest biodiversities in the world. Per square meter, where we all live, is on par, if not more, than the Amazon rainforest. Just on Grootbos alone, our entomologists have found over 65 different bees, over 48 different ants. When you actually start looking at the different small stories in and around us, it fascinates and drives great interaction. But you need to take your community along with you. You can only protect what you know and what you love. And if we want everyone to have the same passion for the environment, conservation, and address climate change, we need to take our communities along with us. Obviously, there's the plant diversity on Grootbos. Michael, I think it was in the presentation last night, so somebody said to Michael, what are you thinking developing or trying to develop a lodge, a 5-star lodge in the middle of nowhere with no animals? But we celebrate our incredible biodiversity. We do these amazing botanical safaris, very sensory experiences where we go taste, touch, and smell and understand and discover exactly what we're all surrounded with. So there's a botanical layer, there's an entomological layer. No entomology study has ever been done on the Cape Agulhas Peninsula. And it's not, for Grootbos and for our commercial purposes, it's not as much value in the actual furthering and understanding and greater value to all of us and all of us in the area. As I said, you have to take the community along, right from early learning centers to our sports programs. Michael spoke earlier about his sports programs, our community coaches. It's about safe, positive, pragmatic work in the community. It's also is working with those community champions. It's not a top-down approach in our experience. We have an incredible amount of fun. We do surf programs with the girls. Our sports coaches are forever. There's always a tournament or a hockey or something, canoeing, teaching kids how to swim. And then, as we all know, yes, shared value, everybody has said, or many people have mentioned over the number of talks, is that shared value and responsible tourism hit the skids with COVID. But actually, I think we need to redirect that narrative, because the greater the crisis, the greater the need for calm and for tourism to stand shoulder to shoulder with its communities and not to forget about the conservation crisis that we're all facing. All our sports coaches who were quite admittedly never cooked in their lives got stuck in and helped, because we had these big custom made, and we actually needed all the sports coaches' muscles to help cook in these big pots. So these are just some of the practical examples of implementing shared value. And along with that, implementing some of the sustainability requirements in our sustainability dashboard, which is tabs and tabs and tabs and very long. But in our assessments in 2020, lo and behold, we are not only carbon neutral, but carbon negative. And that's shared value is also not about simply doing the work. It's about, it actually makes business sense because it's operational efficiency. All our organic waste from our kitchens goes to our pigs. This isn't rocket science. This isn't fancy technology. The pigs do great work. They just don't like oranges or green peppers. Yeah. And this all ties in with a global direction, which everybody has acknowledged, the SDGs. We speak to currently 13, but there's such a good guideline, not just for tourism, for all of us to implement and adhere to. And yeah, that's me. Thanks.
I mean, I know Groepos, and the stories of what Groepos does are amazing. What I'd like to just ask you, so first of all, we're because of concentrating on community benefits, benefits to communities. That's what Porter specifically said, is shared value. And then he specifically said it gives you competitive edge. Does it? Oh, it can do. So would you perceive that Groepos, compared to, could be a Big Five lodge, any other five-star lodge, do you have a competitive edge because of the nature of your community programs, or all of your climate change community conservation, which I love those 4 C's, by the way? Can you charge a premium price, or is it you do it because it's just...
I don't think, Michael, I don't think that, well, I know that it wasn't the intention, but it's the right thing to do. And through that came the acknowledgement of this is the right way to do business. So the competitive edge is also the operational efficiency that we now do. And as Michael said, he's just sold over 800 carbon tons, which goes back into our work. So actually perhaps not immediately obvious, but when you work through it, doing business the right way does pay off in the end. You have, I held a corporate group the other day, and 2 of my staff came through the vocational college that I've known from the start. So maybe it's not always immediately obvious. Also, the other thing that Porter now, they're also calling shared value Afro-capitalism, because it's a great way, and it makes sense for capitalism in Africa.
Fantastic, thank you.
Cool.
And just for me, a couple of take-homes from what Ruth said is, one, she said it's in our DNA, it's in our line items. So you measure what your goals and you want to achieve are, and if you're doing community beneficiation, it's like integrated reporting. It has to be in your line items. You have to measure it all the time, equally as much as you measure your profits. And then the other one that I really liked is co-creation, but we won't go any further because we are short of time, sort of. So Glenn, can I ask you to come up and go through Transfrontier Parks destinations? Thank you. So,
whoops. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here and to share some of our experiences with you. We describe our business, the business of TFPD, as partnering with communities to commercialize their tourism assets. We manage 4 lodges and 8 wilderness and cultural camps, each one of which is owned by a community in a different part of South Africa. Those camps and lodges between them have got 280 beds on any given night that we have to fill with guests, or we try to fill anyway. And of course, COVID hasn't helped, but there is life beyond COVID. I think I could sit here and elucidate on all sorts of economic factors. I could tell you that, for example, Kaus Lodge, our little 24-bed lodge in the Kgalagadi Transfrontier Park that we opened in 2007, has delivered over 70 million rand of economic activity in the local economy, not outside of it, but within that local economy. I could tell you that between these lodges, since we started our company in 2006, we've expended over 300 million rand from these 280 beds. But the important fact is that of that 300 million rand, 250 plus million has been spent in the local economies. I could tell you that we've contributed by way of taxes to the fiscus, because sometimes this fact is forgotten or overlooked. We've contributed over 40 million rand of taxes to the fiscus from these community-owned lodges in these deeply rural areas. I could tell you that we've employed over 160 people at these lodges, or we employ 160 people at our lodges. They look after the livelihoods on a multiple of 7 of well over 1,000 people just from our employees. Forget about the economic activity we've created in the area. But I think the thing I really want to talk about and to focus on is just 3 examples of how we've helped people meet their aspirations that have worked for us, because that for us is what it's all about. It's the fact that there are individuals who can talk about what has happened in their lives and how their lives have changed as a consequence of being part of the TFPD family. And I love this picture that you're looking at now. That was in an area called Makgabeng in Limpopo province, in the middle of nowhere. We were driving along and saw these young girls collecting water from a water hole on the donkeys, and we had to stop and engage with them. And it was difficult for me to believe, and maybe you'll share that same difficulty in believing it, but that young lady sitting on the back of that donkey cart in her red top, when I said to her, what do you do now? She said, I'm at school. And I said, and what would you like to do when you finish school? And she said, I would like to become a chartered accountant. Not an accountant, not a bookkeeper, not anything. I want to be a chartered accountant. Now, for me, that really rang a bell, because that's what I studied. And to think that there are people living in these deeply rural areas who have those aspirations and sadly often aren't met, makes you realize how important it is for tourism to be developed in these local economies, and how there are so many people that need to play a part in doing that. That's a meeting that I held. I'd heard about this place called Beleni. I'd heard about the salt that these ladies were harvesting from a hot spring, that it was a sacred salt and it was a sacred hot spring. And I went to meet with them and I said, I'd like to hear more about this, because I have an idea. I'd read about a restaurant here in Cape Town where the owner, a chap called Craig Cormack, was doing pairing of wine and salt. I thought, what an amazing thing. Anyway, to cut a very long story short, because that's an episode of its own, I met with them. I said to them, I have an idea that could help turn your salt into the caviar of salt. And all of this was done through a Tonga translator, so I'm not sure whether there's a Tonga word for caviar, but somehow the meaning got across. And today, those ladies are harvesting salt. When we started, there were 4 sieves and 4 ladies, because each lady had her own sieve. Today, there are approaching 40 sieves and 40 people earning an income from harvesting the salt, meeting with tourists, but more importantly, there's the exchange of salt and cash on site. But more importantly, that salt today is recognized by the Slow Food Foundation. It's in their Arc of Taste as a product, and it is recognized as one of their presidia, as a site that needs to be protected because of its heritage and its cultural importance. But not only is it that, it is now sought after by some of the top chefs in South Africa and used, and that's, I think, is at the hotel in Newlands. Craig Cormack and Margot Janse are people who have all used this salt in their cooking process. And as I said, the ladies there are now all earning a living from doing it. And the most important one of all is when I was there a couple of years ago, Mama Maria, who was one of the lead ladies, Mama Maria Makari, and she said, do you know that for the first time in my life I was able to sleep on a bed because I had money from this to be able to buy myself a bed. This lady here is Susie Mangwana. I had to write her name down so I could remember it. Susie worked at ShopRite Checkers in Palabora. She lost her job. She had no income. She used to make plates of food sitting at home and go and sell them on the pavement. We somehow discovered Susie. We invited her to cooked meals for us at Mtumeni camp, which is on one of the African ivory root camps. And today, Susie is producing the most amazing meals for our guests from around the world. But she's also taken the initiative. This was the catering for an opening of the, an event that was attended by the Deputy Minister of Tourism. But she's now running a traditional food and wine pairing, which is sponsored by SPA at a boma that she set up in her town of little village of Lulekani, and she's running a successful business. And a couple of years ago, we invited her to partner with the African Ivory Root, and we've established, we won a concession in Kruger National Park, and she's now a third shareholder in the Kruger Bushbraai experience. And then lastly, this is the Drakensberg, the Melody Drakensberg, one of our lodges there, Vitsisok Mountain Lodge, owned by the Batlokwa community. And that's Mr. Moleti, a local man, a carpenter, who previously made very basic kitchen cupboards for residents in the area. We invited him to come up to the lodge. We had some furniture made by professional cabinet makers in Cape Town, shipped them up to the lodge. We invited him to come up there, steal with his eyes, and he went away and he has made all the rest of the furniture. We've spent about 1.5 million rand with him on making furniture for the lodge, and given him, he's developed a skill that enables him to do similar things in different ways. And I want to, this is a man who's a shepherd who looks after our water, and this shepherd arrived with a blanket all etched and as it is now. We've put those blankets online, and he's now tailor-making blankets for clients and selling them. And I think he's earning around 500 rand a blanket from the sale of his blankets, and that happened last week when we were there. And just to conclude, what was the most inspirational of everything for me is shortly after COVID hit, the king of the Batlokwa, Moreno Montedi Mata, called me one day, and he said to me, "Glenn, there's money in the trust fund that was set up into which we pay our rental every month." He said, "We've never used that money before." He said, "If you need that money during COVID, you borrow what you need to keep this lodge alive, because this lodge has meant so much to the community there." So that's what shared value and economic activity is about. Thank you.
Glenn, thank you very much. Wonderful examples of empowerment through uplifting people and helping them get real proper businesses of their own running, which is wonderful. I just want to ask you one question, and for a quick answer. You started with saying that you partner with the communities, and they're busy pulling sticky tape off his face. It's not nice. Some of your lodges, the community are actually shareholders in the lodges, are they not? Or they own the concession with you? Just if we can just see if that is some of your level of partnering.
The communities own all the lodges.
Thank you.
We simply own a contract. We own nothing else.
So I think, thanks. I think that's important too, and he didn't even talk about that. When he said we partner with communities, they are owners. They are co-owners or the owners. So they're really there, and we're getting the SMME supply chain stuff coming from them as well. So they are becoming business owners in working with these lodges. They're not the biggest lodges in the world, but as you also noticed, Glenn started with the metrics. He's measuring it. They're measuring what they're achieving. It's a vitally important thing. You can't just do it and let it go into the wash. So Evie, handing over to Evie from Planetera. Not last but least, whatever that saying is. So let's find out what you do at Planetera, because by the way, I Googled them, and they seem to be an NPO or a charity, whatever, operating out of Canada. So I thought, okay, what does Canada know about Africa? But we'll find out, won't we? And I presume they're global, but I didn't really find that much to find on Africa, but I saw some Asian stuff there. So we're all going to learn. I'm learning with you. Yep. I don't know if I'm sure yet. Nothing? Okay, no worries. No worries, that's fine. No. So this was the problem we had with one of the presentations, so let's hope we get it going shortly. Okay. We're good.
Okay, duplicated. Okay, no worries. I can start. Hi everyone. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. I'm not going to take a lot of your time. I'm just going to share a little bit about Planetara, what it is we do, and how we create local shared benefit through community tourism. So while they're working on this, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Evie Ndlovu, originally from Zimbabwe. I'm the programs manager for Planetara, and I work in Africa, the Middle East, and in Europe. Yeah, so yeah, you can present. Just here on present. Sharp. Nyawangane. Sharp. Okay, so yep, that's me. And so who's Planetara? So we are a Canadian nonprofit and also have 501c3 status in the US. We in community tourism. So we have over 13 years experience in community tourism, and we are very much impact-driven organization, and our main mission is to uplift lives through community tourism. So we're very spread out across the world. We're very much field-based more than HQ-based, so you'll see there's team members on all the continents that are representing Planetara and working directly with the communities. So when we talk about community tourism, we talk about communities in the physical space and also as a group of people that are together and also in the form of cooperatives, non-profits. So we work with travel experiences that are owned, led, and run by local communities. So these can be cooperatives, these can be indigenous organizations, these can be non-profits, these can be social enterprises as well. And this is our model. It's a very simple model on how we work. We work by identifying communities, providing training and grants, providing connection to the market for local communities, as well as mentorship to small communities in order to bridge the gaps that we see in the tourism industry between mainstream travel and local communities as well. So we do an industry needs-based research in order to work with communities. So we look at 5 key factors of the tourism industry, or 5 key needs. So these can be meals, accommodation, handicrafts, transportation, and experiences as well. We also provide training and grants. So we're also very much grant funding organization where we work with the communities based on what gaps they have in knowledge and in experience, and we help them to create products, create itineraries, as well as to develop their products expansively. And finally, one of the key parts of our work is the market connection. So we work with travel companies all over the world in order to connect them with local communities. More than just visiting a local community and leaving, we provide communities that can have a supplier relationship with travel companies all over the world. And finally, through our global community tourism network, we continue to support communities in the long run. This is by self-paced and continued learning. We've got an online learning hub that we provide for free to communities where they can learn everything from creating experiences, managing their finances, developing their businesses, everything that they need to build their businesses. And pre-COVID, we looked a lot different than we do right now. We had worked with over 100 communities in 56 countries and had a 100% success rate with the communities that we work with. And between 2015 and 19, $10 million was spent as a result of our work in communities. So this is not $10 million that we've given communities. This is $10 million that travelers have spent in communities between 2015 and 2019. And again, between 2015 and 2019, we facilitated the travel of 700,000 travelers in these communities that we work with. And our aspirational goals moving forward, post-COVID, everything looking different and more travelers wanting to travel local and support more communities, we're hoping to have at least $50 million 50 million travelers experience community tourism, $1 billion being spent in communities, as well as over 3.5 million lives changed. And this is not a very big number for us. It's just aspirational, but we know we can achieve it considering the experiences and what we have seen happen over the last couple of years. And our partnerships, in order for us to be able to move forward with our work, we partner up with national networks. So these can be community tourism associations, for example, Okota in Uganda. We also partner up with travel companies in order to facilitate them actually being in the communities and partnering up with communities as suppliers. One example being G Adventures. And also we work with governments and leading nonprofits such as IUCN, who we're currently working with, on their groundbreaking project working in protected areas and also introducing community tourism to the communities that live in and around communities, protected areas all over the world. And this is just our numbers in Africa at the moment. We're working in 18 African countries and we have 78 communities, but in total we're working in about 76 countries globally and have 400 communities within our network that we actively support through our resources. And yeah, so as we work in our field, there's definitely a lot of benefit that we continue to see, it being the community benefit as well. We're seeing the shared value, growing communities, gaining experience, and being able to tell their stories through travel authentically. Companies are benefiting as well. Our corporate partnerships are able to provide a first-hand look and a first-hand experience that is led by the communities, thus the travelers themselves can experience authentic and can see where their money is going in the local communities. And then when we partner up with organizations, and one of the key selling points of Planetara and who we are is we have a 100% success rate in helping communities and bringing them to market. We are the world's leading nonprofit that is using community tourism for change. And also we have a proven methodology as shown by the numbers and the work that we do. So thank you so much. And yeah, happy to have some questions. Thanks.
Evie, thanks very much. As you sit down, because we're short of time, I'm going to ask my one question to you. I love the fact that the community businesses are owned, led, and run by locals, so they're very much ownership. I'd just be interested in two things, and maybe concentrate on your African projects. I'd like to know the scale of these businesses. Are they still all small businesses, or some moving to medium size or to large? And then, are any of these communities in urban or city situations, or are they always currently rural?
Yeah,
Can we tell?
Yep, thanks. So they start off as small, usually. So I'll give a very practical example, one being Klatu. They're actually exhibiting here from Cape Town. So we start with communities when they're small and we grow with them. So we work with them all the way from the start on how to create their experience.
And how big is your biggest one? Or what sort of turnover might a bigger one get to so far?
We get, I think, some of the largest that we get are receiving maybe about $500,000 a year.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
What's that in rounds? But okay, great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Evie. So, unfortunately, Howard, I don't see him, but he gave me 5 minutes extra, and we're nearly at the end of our 5 minutes. So I'm just going to make a concluding comment that if I'd like perhaps any of you to talk about, everything we've heard is fantastic, and I don't think everybody's doing it. But I've got another 5. Oh, wow. Okay. So then let me go for a round of audience questions then. Would anybody like to ask any of my panelists anything? Oh, we've got lots, which is fantastic. The gentleman at the back there is getting his mic.
Hello, my name is Craig, and
Good morning, everybody.
It is afternoon, but it's fine.
I'm actually interested in what kinds of challenges you faced in actually engaging communities that might not see themselves as disenfranchised, and how do you approach them to kind of standardize the kind of luxury product that business requires from them?
Anybody feel, do they want to answer that one?
Do you want to start? I'll follow.
If I may, so the challenges are not to work with communities and community champions, and community work is there's always, you learn along the way with the community. We don't all have all the answers. You're working all together for the answers, etc. With working together for the solutions for them, understanding their challenges and their needs. So it's a lot, it's not a top-down approach at all. That's definitely very, it's more working with them, understanding their needs and challenges, working with the champions in the community and setting the example and working through it towards a solution. You're going to have failures in any community work. It's inevitable.
Thanks. Any other questions?
If I could just add to that, I think the community's reaction may differ from wherever they are based. Where we work, as I mentioned, is very deeply rural areas. Invariably, the infrastructure that we have taken over has been in a dreadful state of disrepair. The communities, in some instances, had accommodation or infrastructure built for them, and then it was basically abandoned, and so they were desperate to find someone who would be willing to work with them to make it work. So we've had very good relations as in general, but it is a question of managing expectations as well, because in many cases communities are persuaded that it's a good idea to be in tourism, and sometimes the infrastructure that is built is not necessarily in the best place, but they've been persuaded that this is good for them and they're going to make millions from it, and you have to disabuse them of that at times. So it's not an easy journey, and it always ends up being about managing their expectations.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I mean, the main reason I ask is because these are basically new business models that are emerging, and how do we make them easier across the rest of Africa? Because they address the challenges that people face while also, bringing a commercial aspect that previously was denied. So it's kind of like, I love what you're doing, and it would be nice to see more of it happening quicker.
So if I may comment perhaps briefly, I think the imperative to more of it happening is it's becoming what I said, a hygiene factor. Everybody's going to do it, you must do it, everybody has to do it. And if we exclude our communities, on this continent in particular, we will not have a tourism business. You can't have the poverty next to the 7-star tourists. It's not going to last. It's the same as other types of imbalances like white privilege and things like that. But just another thing, I think your first question, I'm working with 2 different lodges that have got community programs or actually community partnerships. And you must never, the community must be treated as equals. They are equals. They're like equity of all human beings is there. The fact that they don't have understanding of corporate governance, of risk committees, of return on investment, you work with them through that, but you don't make that their disadvantage. They have a different background. Ubuntu and tribal systems can be beautiful, okay? Yes, there's poverty now, and that is the challenge, and so we have to work through that, but you don't ever approach working with them as if they are these poor people who need to be helped. That is where we're going wrong. That would be patronizing. That is the old model. That is what I think anyhow. Okay, one more quick question. Okay, this gentleman in the middle. I'm sorry, because I'm now down to another 3 minutes, I think. Let's see.
Hello, I just have a question for Planet Terra. I just want to know, do you also cooperate with municipalities regarding that? Because what we found in our municipal area is the challenge of linking people that lived in informal, previous disadvantaged area to linking them with mainstream tourism. And it's a quite challenge for us because firstly the community must take ownership, and also they must see the financial benefit. Nobody's going to buy in if they don't see some kind of socioeconomic change.
Hi. Yeah, so we do work with municipalities, local government all the way up. And one of the reasons that we do so and directly work with the communities is because we have a collaboration versus charity model. So the only way that communities can take ownership is if they are an equal partner, as she has said. So in our work, when we're working with the governments or with the municipalities, we provide the long-term training and the long-term support and the long-term mentorship. It's not, here's a business, run the business, goodbye. We will work with them all the way from start until they grow and they feel like they don't need us anymore. And even when they don't, we are still there to support them. So in terms of and we're also very mindful, that is why we're a very local-based organization. We're more on the ground than at headquarters. So we've got more field staff than we do have admin staff because we want to be there in the local communities. For example, I'm an African woman, so it's easier for me to work with local African communities because they could be me, they could be my mother. We have that shared value, we've got that shared communication and that shared, desire to succeed, and therefore we've got that understanding of how we can take their businesses and the processes in a way that has never been done before.
Gillian, take one more question, please.
Okay, we had one lady here. One question there, yeah. One more. I also want to say something.
I will let you speak, Gillian, don't worry.
Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists. I don't know if it's a question, but it's more of the future of community tourism. Historically, community tourism in most lodges in Africa has been to visit schools.
Oh, yeah.
So when are we as an industry going to agree what is no longer actually acceptable?
Wow.
I must take that. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
The reason is that we have a big problem in the Gambia with that. So what I've started saying to tourists, in the white tourists and tour operators in the Gambia, you know, I've got this busload of Gambian tourists and they really want to visit your child's school. Could you arrange that for me? And suddenly they don't want to do it and it stops. It's the most effective way in my view, but I didn't mean to stop you completely.
Oh, Howard, you can also ask questions. I think you're controlling the people over there who turn me on and off. I think that, you know, I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that. I want to make a couple of, you know, rounding up comments afterwards. Working through many of these types of community partnering, community beneficiation, they're maturing beyond taking them to a school or a clinic, which is terrible, patronizing zoo type stuff. But I still, nearly every time I hear, we are partnering with the community. We being some private sector business operator or whatever. I think I've once been where a tribal chief stood on the stand and said, we are partnering with, and named the brand. So I think we've got a mindset which is still that we partner with communities. It should be a we. The we should be us. We are in partnership with each other, you know. And when we get to that, ultimately, someday, when we have got proper community partnerships, we won't need MPOs. I mean, our goal should be to not need an MPO to get community tourism working. Community tourism should be working. And I liked Glenn's statement about the lady wanting to be a CA. This other particular lodge, I was working with the community leaders, and they said, we're trying to say, what is success? You're in partnership with this business. What does success look like? And obviously, the idea was to get dividends going into community trusts, doing all sorts of projects in the community that they would control. And they said, when we have engineers and lawyers in 10 years' time who are coming out of our community and running any type of business, as well, we hope we'll also have tourism and lodge experts coming out of the community. I don't think we're going to get there easily, but we really need to keep progressing this till the communities are equal partners with us. And the wonderful world in the future wouldn't need MPOs. Like you said, some of yours get to the level where they actually don't need support. Don't know if anybody wants to say any rounding comments or comment on that. Okay, Evie?
Yeah, I wanted to answer as well, like in terms of, you know, community tourism going into schools and sort of the patronizing type of communities. I think one of the key things that we do and we work with the communities is to help communities create their own responsible travel guidelines. So if communities are given the tools to create their own policy, where it is a part of a community's policy to not have travelers come into schools, to not have travelers interact with children or anything of that sort, that is the only way. If we stop making decisions for communities and they're not in the rooms, then there's not much that we can do.
Fantastic. Thanks, Evie. Great comment. Glenn, any last 15 seconds?
Yeah, I just think, as Michael Lutzai said earlier today, it's the right thing to do, and if we don't do it, we're going to have a major problem.
Yep.
And one of the things that is forgotten is that conservation relies on the development of community tourism, because we forget that on the borders of all of our game reserves and our major game reserve, Kruger National Park, live thousands and hundreds of thousands of people who are seeing land on the other side of the fence that they don't have access to and don't have the ability to earn money from. And so long as they are denied that, we're sitting on, I think, a time bomb with regard to that clash between conservation and communities.
And Ruth, any last comments?
No, I think basically we've covered it all, but I think to just reiterate what we've all been saying, shared value is not simple CSI. It's not a philanthropy. This isn't just it isn't just charity. I think the tourism industry's moved beyond that. Shared value is a deeper, we are in this together, this Ubuntu feeling. So I think that's quite important, and completely agree with the rest of the sentence. Yeah.
Please, can you give this fantastic panel a great round of applause? Thank you. Thank you, gents and ladies. Thank you very much. I think we have to give our mics over to somebody else.
Thanks very much indeed, Gillian.